Okay, Genesis 4 to 11. So we're going to start with your brilliant comments as usual. I'll put you on gallery view. Um, and we'll talk a little bit. I'm not going to cover the flood, but that's why we're going to talk a little bit in this discussion. Just give you a few pointers and then go to 4 and 11, like we said. So, first of all, Rudolph, try to have more questions. You are explaining everything. So yours is more of a reflection, and I need more of a kind of more of a wrestling. You know what I mean? So your points are great. Like I enjoy reading it, but I actually need more questions to feed the discussion. So try to put more questions and discomforts in your writing, and less theorizing. Good. Cologne, also please single spaced one page. Are you there, Cologne? Where's Cologne? Ah, there you are. Yes. Can you single space, please?
All right.
Okay. All right. Let's start with I guess Cologne, since I didn't find any questions, Rudolph, in yours that I
Just,
could deal with.
just quickly asking, did you find the first days?
Yeah. I got you. I
Right,
put
so you
you in.
got all that.
Yes.
Okay, good.
No worries. Good. Okay. So Cologne asking a legitimate question. If there's no one else around, how did Cain find a wife? So actually, there's two answers to that. I prefer the second one, but I'll give you both answers. The first answer is that he married a sister. So actually, in those days, it was quite common. But other scholars actually believe that Adam and Eve are they're the ancestors of just one group of people, right? So they're the ancestors of the people who emerged out of Mesopotamia, right? And you had maybe a different ancestor in Asia, in Africa, and so forth. But this is the specific story, not of the ancestors of mankind, but the ancestors of a specific group of people. So I kind of like that second one better, that, they're just the story of that area of the world, right? So and that there were other people and other legends and other creation myths and stories all over the world, and this is just localized in this region of the world, the ancient Near East, right? Does that answer your question a little bit, Cologne?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, Olivera. Yes, Olivera. Olivera, it was funny today to read you. So first, I like what you mentioned, this notion of God's fragile ego, especially when we talk about the Tower of Babel, right? We see that God seems to be very insecure here with the success story of humankind. And a lot of you mentioned this, right? You're like, what is God's problem? Why can't he be happy with our um, projects, our achievements, right? Why does he gotta always crush us and be the only one in the room, who's creative and interesting, right? So I've heard quite a few comments on that, and we're of course going to talk about that today, whether God has a fragile ego or whether there's something else going on, right? A lot of you also worried that these texts, Genesis 4 to 11, with has a lot of punishing is going on, right? God seems to be kind of like slamming his fist on the table several times, right? And so sounds more to some of you like father's house, right? Context than mother's house. So we have to look at that, right? What is God doing with Cain and with the flood and with the Tower of Babel, right? Is this God asserting his authority, or is something else going on, right? So we'll be looking at that. And then Olivera mentioned that it would be nice to have a daughter's house. I thought that was nice. Um, and she's basically, it's interesting. I mean, I was kind of like speechless at the end of reading that. I don't even know how to answer that, Olivera, but I'm sharing with you because it was interesting. So she said, yeah, if God will be who he will be, right, then why are we relying on these old texts, right, for guidance? Shouldn't we be looking, right, shouldn't we be connecting to God in the here and the now and moving forward, right, without these relics? This would be the daughter's house, according to Olivera. That was interesting. I liked it. I don't know what to say. Apart from, yeah, anyone want to try to respond to Olivera about leaving behind the relics of these texts and going, paving new territory? Anybody want to comment on that? I thought that was interesting. Um, no, everybody's speeches. No, Christodoulou, go ahead.
Well, I guess there's like a received idea that God is a timeless being, like outside of time and space. So there is no like evolution to God. Like it doesn't necessarily change.
Yes,
So there is no like,
yeah, I see what
yeah,
you're saying. Yeah, okay, so, okay. Except this idea of a timeless God, I know this is what has been argued by philosophers, but it's hard to see unless, yeah, it's hard to see that in the text, I guess, because you see God constantly moving along with the people. So but I see what I like what you're saying, because it seems to imply that the texts also have a true revelation, because God is who he is, right? I am that I am. If we use this one, then we can see God here, in the past, in the present, and in the future, right? So, but the problem is that in the Hebrew Bible, it's hard to come up with this notion of a timeless God, because the only God we know is in time. There, it's the philosophers from Greece, right, who are always interested in going beyond reality to the world of forms, who came up with this construct, right? But it's not, you don't see that here, right? So it's hard to argue that, although it does respond nicely to Oliveira. Rudolph, you want to respond also?
Yeah, I actually want to respond to Christodoulou. I am in disagreement using the word evolution and God not having any sort of evolution. I view the entire Genesis as an evolution of both, the product of his work as well as of himself, as he realizes that what he has produced is not perfect, even though he set out to do it that way. He now changes and morphs. So when you morph, there is some sort of evolution, however you want to use it. And that is what does not jive with timeless and spaceless. The context of how these texts were written, in my mind, is purely a storytelling, an attempt to give it a philosophical dimension. So evolution, I have a challenge with.
Yeah, I would tend to agree that a lot of you in your papers talked about God's omniscience, that God knows everything. Not in these texts, right? God is constantly taken by surprise, like unpleasant surprises, sometimes pleasant, right? But he's constantly kind of, shifting along with human beings. My phone is talking to me. Hold on. Let me get rid of this. Okay, yes. So, at least here in these texts, right? So, these notions of God being all knowing, outside of space, sometimes also all powerful. These are Greek constructs, right? That come from their view that the truth of the universe is outside of time, right? It's not the Hebrew view. Everything is here, right? Including God in a way. Let's see. Yes, I see a couple more hands. You guys are really into this one. So let's have all three of you on that, and then we stop, then we move on. So Williams, Perso, and Justin, go ahead.
So I was going to say, like, there hasn't been moments of crisis of faith. Normally, when the Bible gets added to, it's a moment of crisis of faith. So there hasn't been large crisis of faith where it would need for us to have new parables. But we are in an era, we're in a middle point in history where we probably will have new parables and new gospels added at any moment. So I feel like God isn't timeless, but our performance and connection to God in and of itself does change. Because regardless, each religious pattern that we have, like we still used to sacrifice animals in the very beginnings of Christianity. So our performance of Christianity will change as time goes on. Like we've gone from physical sermons to digital sermons. We may go to even audio sermons at some point. So I feel like this is a thing that may say that the being itself does not change, but our connection to it will change over time as we change.
Okay, right. God changes as our perspective changes, right? So in that sense, yes, very nice. Perso, and then oh.
I was just gonna say, like, I feel like God changes throughout, like as the readings change, like he does change, like the chapters. So there's Genesis and then whatever, blah blah blah, like all the way to the New Testament. There is a change in God after Christ, like entirely. Like he's more forgiving, he's less harsh in the New Testament compared to the Old Testament. The Old Testament God, it's like kind of like, oh my God, this happened. So
We'll
that's
see for so, because I know this is the cliche, right? That the God of the Old Testament is this wrathful, jealous God, and the New Testament is loving, forgiving, hippie God, right? So this is why it's good that we're studying these texts through Mother's House perspective, because I think there are actually a lot of connections between the teachings of Jesus and the text that we are studying, but we haven't seen that yet, right? So we'll see. So I understand that you're seeing that like that. Hopefully by the end of today, you might shift a little bit your take on that. And then we will move on to the next person.
I just want to quickly. I feel like I'd like to argue that God is being consistent. He's not changing at all, actually. Um, like just based off like the couple of stories with the human interactions, like every single time that the humans, I guess, quote unquote, like did something wrong or like I guess quote unquote sinned, they receive punishment for it. So I guess in a sense it is consistent, like, and it's not necessarily like I feel like it's like I guess the humans there's one category and God is another, and like I guess God is just reacting off of what humans kind of do and say, in a sense,
But
and
in a
based off.
consistent way, right? Is that what you're saying?
Wait,
He's reacting to them, but he's still could be inconsistent to his self. Is that what
yeah, I'm saying I guess so to say that he's more independent from his like independent with his like morality and his like sorts of judgment, and like the people are like kind of separate not separate, I don't know if separate's the right word, but like I agree with you in a sense that like he's living life with them in a sense, but there's also like he's also standing firm in his own beliefs and like refusing to, I guess, compromise and being consistent in that sense, which is more aligns with the Father's house. I which yeah.
Well, I agree with you that there's a consistency, but I'm going to try to argue today that the consistency is with this notion of constantly standing by humanity and helping them in their evolution. That's where I feel God is being consistent. Systematically, we're going to see that today. That it's not about punishing, right, or affirming his authority in the Father's house way. It's about um, assisting the human being in their development. So in that sense, he is being consistent, even though he has to modulate, right, his approach. Okay, we need to continue. Keep your questions. We'll get to it in a little later. Okay, Butterfield. So yes, very good question, Butterfield. This is with the Tower of Babel. Why does he want to create confusion? Why isn't there, right? Shouldn't we be happy that for once human beings are cooperating, they're at peace, they're building something peacefully together, and God is like, let me mess this up, right? So we're gonna look at that, right? There's a reason why God is, well, as Olivera is saying, insecure, or maybe there's something else going on, right? But definitely, right, we need to address that question. That's a very good question. Other thing you mentioned, Butterfield, had to do with the women in the book of Genesis. So I wanna nuance a little bit your view. You're saying that the women further, right, when we talk about Abraham, Isaac, and so forth, are still very much, right, the culture is still very much patriarchal, and you're right, of course, right, we're still in patriarchy, but there is a number in these texts, if you want to look at them later. So this is Genesis 12 on. You can see a number of subversions of patriarchy going on within these texts, and I have noted three, which you can jot down if you want. First of all, the women are named, not the children, but the wives, and one daughter, right, is named. So this is already interesting, right? Second thing, which is very, very striking, a number of these women are directly spoken to by God, right? So we have Rebecca, who actually goes to inquire of God when she's pregnant. And we have Hagar, the servant girl, right? She's actually, this is a very interesting story, which I wish we would do here, but she is addressed by God on the same level as Abraham was addressed by God. There is in the story a parallel between Hagar and Abraham, as though they're both leaders of two important nations, right? So it's very interesting, that story on Hagar. And then, of course, the women influence the history, right? They're not just sitting there bearing children, right? They actually have they have the power to shift the course of history. We see this with Sarah, of course, and then especially Rebecca, right? She's my favorite. She's the woman with the most agency in the whole matriarchs, right? She's a very interesting person. So I hope that that gives you a few insights, Butterfield, to maybe explore further. But definitely in these texts, we have, yeah, of course, the dominant culture is patriarchal, but within the patriarchy, the women are actually moving very freely, right? Um, Even Hagar, right, ends up the mother of a nation, which is what she was, Jewish tradition says that she was actually a princess coming from the household of Pharaoh. So she was actually royalty. And she finally ends up, right, with a royal line of equal amount of tribes as Abraham, right? So she's as powerful as Abraham when we finish the story, right? So it's very interesting. Okay, I want to talk briefly. A lot of you also are bringing up the flood. So I want to talk about that because this is really interesting. So I think Kirschnitz mentioned the flood, Butterfield mentions the flood, and I want to talk a little bit about this. In the text, of course, it says God brought the flood, right? But when you read a little closer, you will notice a very interesting detail. Anybody noticed what detail occurs within that context, which might have been the actual real life origin of the flood? Text gives a number of details before the flood occurs that is happening. You can turn there now if you want. We can take a brief little excursus to the flood because this is an interesting detail, which I can connect also to the story of Inanna. There's also something there very similar, which I can tell you right now. If you go to the flood is chapter 6. Yeah. Go to the beginning of chapter 6. Yeah. What happens in the beginning of chapter 6? Kind of strange. There's some strange people, right? The Nephilim. These divine beings, right? We don't know if they were angels or demons, right? But certainly very powerful beings. What are they doing? Or maybe they're just, powerful rulers, right? In any case, something is happening with the women here. Anybody saw?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I should have read my head.
It's okay.
But it just says like the Nephilim see the daughters of men, and then they think that they're beautiful, so they take them, and that usually has like a sexual connotation in the Bible. So.
And it's more than a sexual connotation. It's a violent sexual connotation, because to take is to capture. There's an element of violence in the taking. You take an object, you don't take a person, right? So there's an objectification of the woman. There is a sexual violence against the women. And one way to see this is that this is the cause of the flood. Now, let me explain, right? Because if you don't know the literature around this story, the Near Eastern literature, you will not be able to see what's happening here. Let me tell you a story. Just this is a fun story. I'm just in love with Inanna, as you have noticed already. So I've been reading up on her, and it's interesting. So this is a story of Inanna. Remember, she's a goddess. She's very powerful. She falls asleep under a tree, and she's wearing just a little like skirt-like thing. But the story says that on this skirt is written the cosmic law. Okay, so it's interesting that her sexuality is connected to cosmic law, right? And then there's this man walking by, and this man happens to be the gardener of that area. And just before he sees her, the author, the narrator of this story, tells us that this guy, instead of gardening, was uprooting everything. So he's like, kind of a weird gardener. Just instead of watering and taking care of the plants, he was just destroying his own garden. And then once he's done with that, he happens upon Inanna, who is sleeping, and he rapes her, right, in her sleep. She wakes up, she notices that her covering is gone, the covering on which is written cosmic law, right? And she gets in a rage. And at that moment, the whole universe just goes chaotic, right? The rivers stop flowing, the wind stops blowing, there's no more rain, it's a drought, it's the end. Everybody's going to die. And she's looking for this guy, and she's demanding for justice, and she's swearing that she will not bring back the rain or the water or nothing until this guy is caught. In the end, the gods are seeing that humanity is about to die. So they send this guy to her, right? They find him, they pick him up, and they put him in front of her. And she says, of course you will die. And then she says something strange, which I haven't figured out yet, but she says, but the poets will sing about you, right? So that's the story, right? So there's connections, right? There are connections between the way that this man trespassed on this woman's sexuality, thereby bringing about cosmic disharmony in the text of Inanna. And when we see this story, we can read our passage in the same way. There is a trespassing of the woman's sacred sexuality, right? The men are just taking whatever they want. Remember with what we learned in Genesis 2, that it's the limits that preserve cosmic harmony. When you start to take everything, including people, like a fruit, right? Picking them, plucking them, and eating them, everything is a fruit, there is no limits. This is the beginning of cosmic disharmony, right? So we can explain, apart from God, right? We can explain the flood as being this inability of humankind to curb its lust, right? They were picking everything like a fruit and eating anything they wanted. There were no limits placed on the human desire, and this is what caused the cosmic disharmony and the entry of chaos, which is these primordial waters, right? Remember, the waters were separated. Now they just cross everything. They transgress. Like we transgress, the waters now will transgress the limit that God placed upon them. Are you seeing a little more deeply what happened during the flood? Is not like God sitting on a throne being, ooh, bad people, let me punish them. And there's something inherent to what we are doing that caused the flood. Do you see what I'm saying? Put your hand on the screen if you followed it's hard to teach you because I don't see your faces. So I have no idea if anyone's listening to what I'm saying. It's really annoying on Zoom like this. Okay, so that can explain a little more, hopefully. I mean, it would have been nice to spend more time on the flood story, but I really wanted to give you this because this is a really problematic moment, very father's housey, right? But now you can see that really we're talking here about mother's house outrage, right? At the trespassing of her daughters, right? Her daughters are being trespassed upon, their sacred sexuality is violated, and this is what is causing Mother Earth to rage and chaos to come back, right? I just wanted to, do this little detour. So hopefully that's a little clearer for the flood. Okay, yes, Anderson, go ahead.
So I have a question then. Like, you're saying that it's men that can't like control their lust, but what do the Nephilim have to do with that then? Because, or not the Nephilim, but or the divine beings or whatever. Because isn't it the divine beings that do that and not necessarily like mankind?
Yeah, so that's a really good point, actually. So did God destroy the earth because he was sick and tired of the Nephilim? We don't know. See, we don't know who the Nephilim are. This is the problem, right? So some people say they're angels or demons. Some people say they're simply very powerful kings, right? Who are just taking. So of course, it's not all of mankind, obviously, who is doing that, right? But there are certain, the people in power, right? Which are in charge of cosmic balance, right? Remember, Adam is considered to be in charge, and then anybody else who has a position of power is like Adam. He's in charge of the cosmic power, order, harmony. So if these guys start to take whatever, that tells you everybody's doing that, right? And so in that sense, the cosmic order is completely disturbed by, if the powerful are doing that, then everyone really also is doing, or at least the path is open for others to do that too. Does that help?
Right. Yeah, so you're saying that it's not necessarily that like, or it's not necessary that the Nephilim or like these divine beings are like are separate from humanity. They could just be like different, or humans that are in like a different ring of society, I get, or like the upper rings or whatever.
Yeah, for sure, the upper rings, right? So they could be,
Right.
I mean, who knows, right? I mean, some people
Yeah.
speculate they are the angels that God cast on the earth, they're going around, taking the women. But we don't know. The text doesn't explain, right? So, but we do know these are powerful beings, and they're the power strata, probably the ruling class, right? And in that sense, even if they're gods, right, they're still in charge of the cosmic harmony, and they're destroying it by transgressing on the women's agency, right, or sexual space. Okay, so that was just interesting idea to throw to you. Okay, Perso. Yes, good questions from Persona with Cain and Abel. and we'll talk about that. Why in the world does God, arbitrarily prefer Abel, right? We're going to talk about that. What is God doing? This, and then why is he mad at Cain? Duh, you're going to prefer his brother and you don't want him to react? What are you doing? Right? So God, again, instigating problems, right? Just like he was doing in the garden, putting a tree in the face of everybody. Now he's creating more drama, right? Well, this is a drama queen, right? God as a drama queen. That would be Perso's take on that. So yes, we'll talk about that, obviously. O is wondering why God is asking so many questions. And this is interesting because, yes, why is God asking so many questions? Anybody have any idea why God constantly running after human beings with questions? What's he doing? What game is he playing? Anybody have an idea on that? This is interesting. Olivera, go ahead.
I would say that he wants to make human beings to reason. They want to instigate them to looking for answers.
Even true, he wants to get them to think, but more than that, have you ever been in the playground? Remember when you were a kid and you were in
Exactly.
the playground and there was that kid running after you all the time? Hey, do you want to go there? Do you like this? Hey, what is God doing on the playground of the cosmos? Edmonds, help us.
I feel like he's trying to learn from them, trying to understand their motivations and their reasons for doing things in a way.
Yes, God is like, what the hell is going on? Tell me what's happening. I don't understand what's going on here. What else? What else could be? What when you question, what are you trying to do, Rudolph? What's the purpose of a question?
Well, you're trying to install the ability to reflect upon your own actions. You're holding a mirror up in front of the person and you say, why are you doing this? What are you doing? Where are you going with this?
This is true, but there's even something more going on the side of God. There's something that you can sense in God, right? We see why he's doing it for us, but why is he doing it for him? There's a reason why he's doing it, even for him. What can you sense God trying to do through all these questions? We are such Greeks that we cannot even fathom that God is simply looking for companionship and dialogue, right? We're not used to this, right? God is running after humanity, trying to strike up a conversation. Basically, the first 11 chapters of Genesis is God trying to strike up a conversation and not getting an answer. Watch this. Genesis 3. What's his face? Adam, where are you? No answer, right? And then, what have you done? She did it, right? And then he continues, Cain, where's your brother? I don't know. Why should I care, right? Then he goes on, Noah, I'm going to destroy humanity. No answer, right? Another problem. And then he goes on and on, all the way to Abraham. Finally, with Abraham, Abraham is like, yes, Lord, Hineni, here I am. Let's talk, right? And finally, God has a friend, right? This is God trying to make friends. But we are so used to thinking of God on a throne up there, judging us and trying to make us better. We forget that God in the Hebrew Bible is first and foremost a God which is looking for companionship and looking for relationship. And these questions, just to answer, is God reaching out, trying to have a conversation. Right? Does that make sense? Oh, are you there? Yes, I see you. Does that answer a little bit your question on that or your concern?
Yeah, I guess kind of going off what you were saying, like the friend thing. I think also in the book of Psalms, King David refers to God as a friend and as something along those lines, as like more intimate, like adjective to describe God, which also like could, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, right? This is really God trying to create a relationship, begin a conversation with this creation, which is not really yet very evolved, right? So, okay, very good. Anderson is asking a number. That was a really good paper, by the way, Anderson. That's what I'm looking for. Check out Anderson's paper if you can next time, right? This is all the questions you had, but that was great. So here are a few that he mentioned. Where's Anderson? There he is. Yeah, why is Cain punished as a wanderer? Good question. We'll talk about that. Why did he kill his brother? Also, we'll respond to that. Oh, yes, that was nice. The conclusion of Anderson. It seems like God really hates humankind, constantly, crushing it, right? Every step of the way. Anytime there's someone who has a little bit of ambition, Anderson is noticing very correctly. Anytime someone has a little bit of ambition, whether it's Eve or Cain, or the Tower of Babel, God is crushing it, right? So we'll have to see that, right? Is this what's really going on? Kirschnitz, we went over, you had a flood question, right? So where is Kirschnitz? There she is, yes. So you were asking, right, why is he rationalizing? So I hope I answered that. And then, of course, you are complaining, along with everyone else, that these chapters are very punitive, right? So where is the mother's house? So we'll have to address all of these. So these are really, you guys are really reading the text very well. You're asking the right questions. Just a few more, Christodoulou. This is a great question. Why does the dialogue stop eventually, right? And it stops a little bit after Moses, right? A little later than you thought, Christodoulou, right? God is still speaking with people like Moses, and then you have the kings, and then there's nothing, right? The prophets, God is speaking through, but not speaking to, right? So that's a good question, which it would be interesting to explore. I think I'm inviting all of you to think about that. Why the shift? What happened, right, in the history of Israel? Edwards, right? Is that the right name? Edmund, sorry, Edmund. I can't read my writing. Edmund. Yes, the omniscience of God, I'm debating in these texts, right? Where is Edmund? Edmund. Oh, there you are, yes. So you're talking, right, is he really omniscient? Seems like he's really struggling. You're right, right? There's no genuine omniscience. It's not like God has a preordained thing, right? And then he's kind of like trying to put us on a chessboard, right? There is a kind of, in any relationship, there is a part which is like, you don't know. And God, in as much as he chooses relationship and not, to be the big puppeteer of the universe, he is going to have some unexpected developments, right? So yes, which is why I say God is scrambling throughout the book of Genesis, right? Finally, Williams, what did I write? I can barely read my handwriting. Oh yes, Williams is complaining about the genealogies. Like, what is going on with these genealogies? By the way, it's not God writing them, right? It's the narrator trying to come up with some kind of human history, right? But yes, we could ask why they spend so much time with that. That is a good question. Go ahead. Do you want to add, I think?
I was going to say, when we were in group, I talked about it as a mnemonic device because of the fact that God has, it's during this period where there were street preachers in Roman or Catholic cities or wherever they were, and they had to get people's attention. So they needed mnemonic devices so you could remember these information. And also it takes on iambic pentameter, like I mentioned that, where it's like a song when they say 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and they say it's so you remember it.
Yeah, you're catching on very nicely to the rhythm of the text. There is a rhythm. It's written many times in a poetic way. Why? Because the memorization is easier in that way, right? So very, very true. Absolutely. Yes, that makes sense. Okay, let's go to chapter 4, and then we'll take a short break and then do chapter 11. Okay, so let's go to the story of Cain and Abel, chapter 4. So you guys, everyone asked the right questions. The main issue here, right, when you're reading the text is why is God being so unjust, right? Why is he ignoring Cain? I mean, look at Cain. I mean, by the way, Cain is the one who had the initiative to do this. Abel is just following, right? Cain is the one that, let's go do a sacrifice. So Cain is clearly the one who is the more spiritually inclined person of the two. It's not Abel who has visions over there and then, no, Abel has nothing, right? It's Cain who initiates, and so you'd think that God would be, impressed, but instead he completely ignores him, and the text doesn't give us explicit reason for that, right? So it seems extremely unjust that God would ignore Cain, turn to Abel, and then of course Cain is really angry, distraught. The text actually is talking more about distress. And then things escalate, and in the end, his brother dies, right, or is killed by Cain, right? But of course, we see Cain is a bad guy based on what he does eventually. But my question to you is this: let's see if you can figure out from the text. There are some clues in the text why God turned to Abel and not to Cain. There are some clues, especially at the beginning. So I'm going to tell you actually which verses to look at, and you will tell me if you're finding the clues as to why God seems to be so, why he prefers Abel. So clues are Genesis 4, 1, 2, 3. My, ah, the numbers are so small. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, all the clues are there. So you need to base it on the text. Don't base it on the church tradition or something you think, right? Go to the text and tell me what you see there that could give you indication as to why God is so ruthless here in these first few sections. Okay, Rudolph, go ahead. Courageous.
It was God's first pointer to Adam, saying that he is now in charge of the earth and being able to grow goodness from the earth. And if you read between the lines of the first 2-3 chapters, you see that God is also saying then, if you are a shepherd, if you are in charge of other life, you need to honor your job. However, what Abel does is he uses the slaughtered lamb as an offering to get into God's good graces. Whereas it doesn't appear that Cain, the tiller of the ground, uses the proceeds of what he has. He's just simply offering what grew.
Oh wait, isn't it the interesting? So he brought an offering from the fruits of the soil. So you're saying these are not the fruits that he cultivated? These are just things that were.
I'm reading it as such. It is just,
Oh.
look here, the earth grew something. Here it is, Lord. And the shepherd's responsibility is sacred in the sense that he is preserving life and watching over other life.
So you're saying, yes, actually it works, because what you're saying about Cain works. I had never seen that, but you're right, because if it had been from his own harvest, it would have said the first fruits, right? From the harvest. But this, you're saying he just took whatever was lying around,
Whatever was there.
Yeah, interesting. It wasn't coming from him, therefore. It was just, it wasn't, his own flesh and blood. It wasn't really a sacrifice. Is that what you're saying, Rudolph?
It was more, I see it more as a sharing than a particular gift. And the lamb from Abel is the gift to the Lord to get into the Lord's good graces.
It's more personal. It's from his flock, whereas for Cain, we don't know if it's from his.
I'm not sure if it's more personal. I truly read the text as if Abel is out to get brownie points, whereas Cain is just saying, "Lord, here, eat with us. Here's some."
Okay. I like that. And also, Cain is not shedding any blood. I thought that was nice on Cain's part, right? Abel is kind of violent. So, I mean, I've always been sympathetic to Cain. So, but okay, good. Very nice. Let's see who else has an idea of why God would shun Cain and prefer Abel. Yes. Go ahead. And then
I guess similar to Rudolph, I guess the idea of first fruits, the fact that Abel gave the firstborn of his flock in the fat portions, so I guess those are the most rare and most valued during that time, I guess. And it more than I was discussing it with the group, but more than the thing itself, it's more of the intent and the more of the intent of doing it that matters to God. Because Cain, what's it called? Cain just grabbed whatever what was I don't know, I felt the leftovers to God, and I don't know, I feel if you do that to a person that you care about, it's you're spitting on their face, it's
Very nice. Yes, that's a good textual basis, right? Abel gives the first choicest, right? And you would then expect Cain to give what we call the first fruits, right? The best, but it doesn't say that. So Cain is giving a kind of half-assed offering, right? And Abel is giving all of himself. It's a more complete surrender on the part of Abel than on Cain. So yes, this is definitely helping. But there's still something deeper, which has to do with the personality of Cain. And I want to highlight this. So go with me to chapter 1, verse 4. Everyone with me, put your hand in the screen if you're there. Okay, I'm going to read and you're going to see more clearly. Look at this. Now the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gained a male child with the help of the Lord. And male child is not the right translation. It says actually, I have gained a man with the help of the Lord. So again, by the way, watch, Adam is still non-existent. This woman, right? Adam is still bypassed here in the reproduction, right? I did this with the Lord. Adam is still, right? So Eve clearly hasn't yet emerged from her narcissistic personality disorder. Adam is still sidelined, right? But watch this. I made a man with the Lord. And then the text continues. And then on the side, as an afterthought, she bore his brother Abel. Now, watch this, right? Cain is born, firstborn, the man, and then Abel on the side, right, as an afterthought. What do you think is the personality that is going to emerge in Cain? And what do you think is the personality that is going to emerge in Abel after this birth? What do you see there? What kind of man is Cain going to grow up into, and what kind of man is Abel going to grow up into? Tell me. Williams, go ahead.
For Cain, who would be jealous and conniving because he's always trying to get God's perspective. He's always trying to get God's favor.
Why?
For
He's
Abel,
the man. He's the center. Why does he need anybody's favor? He knows he's favored. He was acquired with the Lord.
exactly. No, sorry, I mean Abel.
Yeah,
Abel.
there you go.
Abel, sorry. I reversed it. Sorry, Abel.
Yes, Abel is super insecure, right? For sure.
Cain would be Cain would never, he would be oblivious to his brother's problems.
Absolutely.
And basically
you're
walk
right.
around just like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like just get over it. Like just get over it all the time.
You hit it on the spot. I'm gonna come back to what you said. When everybody else has, anybody else want to add on this? Right. This is Williams is on point. Cain is the only one. When you're born like this, the firstborn, you're the man with God. Who is Abel? Nobody. Right. So Cain very, very certainly grew up with a sense of he is the center and Abel is the periphery. And Abel, in fact, doesn't even exist. In fact, his name, Abel, I want to highlight this because we'll see that word again in Ecclesiastes. Abel in Hebrew, there's a significance to that name. It's actually in Hebrew, it's Havel, and it simply means breath, vapor, exhalation. Right? When you go, that's Havel. So Abel is very insubstantial. He has no substance. Of course, he's born like this in an afterthought. Cain, on the other hand, his name, watch this, Cain, from the root, Hebrew root kana, which means to possess, to acquire. Cain is the one who has substance. He's the one who owns the land. He is the one who is native to the land. Abel, he's over there, shepherd, borrowed land, no substance. He is the stranger. He is the immigrant. He is the refugee. Cain, he's the citizen. He's the native son. He is the one who owns everything. Are you seeing the two? There, it's not just two brothers. It's two kinds of human beings that we are talking about here. Remember, these texts are archetypal, right? They're not just talking about single human beings. They're talking about humanity. So here we have the man, the native son, the one who possesses, right? Who is, I guess, like the Protestant ethic would say, the hardworking man who deserves his prosperity, right? And Abel, he is the non-existent person who is living on borrowed land. He has a dubious job. He has no substance. And now we can understand, right, why God is acting as he is. If Cain is the center and there's no one but Cain, what does Cain need to learn? And what does God teach him precisely when he shifts his gaze from Cain to Abel? What is happening? Tell me. What's God doing to Cain? Yes, Olivera.
Trying to teach him some humility.
Yes, more than that. What is Cain now able to see for the first time that he didn't see before?
Others more than himself.
Yeah, exactly. Abel did not exist for Cain. Why should he? He is nobody. all of a sudden God is shifting Cain's gaze onto his brother and saying, behold, your brother, he is here too. He is also important. He is also one of my creations. See him, hear him, sense him. This is what Williams was saying, right? He has no concern for his brother's feelings. This is the problem of Cain. And when God ignores Cain, what God is strategically doing, he's doing two things. He's giving Abel recognition, which probably Abel had been drooling for all his life, right? But at the same time, he's opening up Cain for the first time to the presence of an other in his life. He's cracking open his self-contained world and enabling him to see for the first time that he's not alone in the universe. Are you following what I'm saying? Right? Okay. Williams, go ahead.
I was gonna say there's if you ever read Sandman by Neil Gaiman, he actually has Cain and Abel as two characters in his book, and you actually explore the relationship because God, as punishment, didn't actually let Cain kill Abel. He actually put them in a loop, and the loop only breaks once they figure out that they basically perpetuating a cycle of like uh, uh, of being inhospitable to each other. And like it's really interesting because it actually talks about this journey that they're on and how they've never really acknowledged each other as two separate beings.
Yeah.
They're stuck in the story.
What can you please put the book's title in the chat so that we can read it, because that sounds great. Also, another person wrote on this is Steinbeck, of course, East of Eden. But these are really interesting books, so please add yours to mine. Absolutely, right? So now hopefully you're seeing, right, that God is not just going around, smashing ambition, right? It's always with God ethics, right? God is constantly obsessed with opening up human beings to the realm of another. He does that with Eve, right? When he cracks her open and gives her desire. He does that now with Cain, who is very much Eve's son, right? They're very similar. They're both narcissistic, right? And Eve, doesn't even acknowledge Adam. Probably Eve still hasn't recovered, clearly, right? So there's really, over and over again, and we'll see the same phenomenon with the Tower of Babel, God is trying to move or sensitize or crack open the human being to its other, is trying to awaken them to ethics, to the possibility of connecting to another. Cain is incapable of relationship because there is no other in his world, right? Same as Eve, right? So now we can look at the punishment. Punishment is interesting, doesn't kill Cain, because of course it's the first offense, right? So he's not going to, this is, Cain probably was surprised when all of a sudden Abel stopped moving, right? So there is some ignorance, naivete. But look at him, right? Cain kills Abel. God comes trying to strike a conversation. It's like, where's your brother? And Cain, this is pure New York attitudes, like, am I my brother's keeper? Right? Like, since when am I my brother's keeper? This is really attitudes. This is not an answer. And then God punishes him with exile. Now tell me, what is the redemptive, right? We know that God doesn't just punish, he redeems. Is there something redemptive in this punishment? And can you tell me what is it? What is it? How is this punishment going to help Cain redeem his, his problem? Anybody have any ideas? How is exile actually perfectly fitted to his transgression or to his problem? Christo Dulu, go ahead.
Yeah, because now Cain has to live like his brother. Like he has to live like second class, like not the favorite first son. He has to live like a stranger.
Excellent, right? God is making him into Abel, right? Oh, you were the center and you couldn't see your other. Now you will be at the periphery and you will learn through the pain of exile what it's like to be an other. And this will make you more sensitive to the others around you, right? We remember God, when the Israelites come back from Egypt, God gives them a commandment and says, you will love the stranger. Why? Because you were strangers. That's how you get to love the stranger. If you were never a stranger, You're never going to love the stranger. This is why God puts us sometimes in the position of the stranger. This is why God sometimes inflicts suffering or pushes us to the margins, marginalizes us, right? Makes us small, so that in that difficult situation we can crack open and become more compassionate. All suffering is a pedagogy of compassion. You can quote me on that, right? Suffering is there to teach us compassion. If we have never suffered, we are all still like Cain. In the self-enclosed universe, there is only me. Suffering is what cracks us open and enables us to feel compassion for others and enables us to feel what others are feeling, right? And so what God is trying to do is to crack Cain open and to awaken compassion in him through the experience of pain and suffering, right? So this is not God smashing Cain. This is God, yes, smashing, but to open him up, right? Olivera, go ahead.
I think on chapter 13, Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. And I thought it's also something, he thought would be something so horrible that he couldn't tolerate, and then would be the end of it. And then also shows like a little bit how strong one can be, because sometimes you go through something and then you're like, oh my God, if this happened, I will not be able to deal with my loved one leave me, or if my mom die or something. And then he went through it, and then he find a wife, and seems like he was quite well.
Yes,
after all.
We'll see. We'll see. Yes, yes. I will talk about that in a bit. Yes, I love the way you put it. For Cain, the experience of exile is so painful because it means he loses everything that gave him a sense of importance, right? God is stripping him of everything that made him important, right? Again, we have a lesson for us, right? When life, right, strips us of things that gave us a status, like strips us of a boyfriend, or strips us of, you know, our job, or strips us, right? We are left with nothing sometimes, and it's destabilizing. But the idea is for something to arise out of that, which is your true self. Right? Too often we hide behind the false self of our success, false self of our popularity, right? And when life takes that away, we have to dig deeper and reconnect to the true self, which is not based on these, right? So Cain really is invited, right, to strip down the false self and to find his true self, right? The ethical self, the self that can relate. And yes, in the end, it seems like a happy ending. It's I won't go too much into that, but he does find a wife. He's capable, right? And he founds a community. So he becomes, right, the first city. This is the first settlement, first group of people. So there is kind of a happy ending. He's also the father of civilization. We see all of the artists and artisans coming out. So perhaps Cain learned his lesson. Yes, I'm going to leave it on that happy note with Cain. I like that. Good, good, good. All right. Let's take a break because I'm exhausted. So 5 minutes, okay? 4:35. 4 minutes, sorry. 4:35. And then we'll come back. I'm going to pause this. No, I'm going to stop it.